Pulling the Trigger is brought to you by Easy Vape North Shore, the industry's leading direct retailer of the highest quality personal vaporizers, e-cigs, vapes, and Canadian-made e-juice. Located at 987 Marine Drive in North Vancouver, or you can check them out online at www.easyvapecanada.com. You can also donate to my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/MarkHughesComic. Welcome to Pulling the Trigger. I'm Mark Hughes, and this is my show. Today's guest is Roger Street, and I know Roger from a few different places. He is a prison guard who actually locked me up a few times in the past. And then I met him in our substance abuse support groups, and he recently started doing comedy. So it's a guy who I keep on running into in various different capacities. It's kind of interesting. Roger's a very centered and calm guy. I don't know if he is Buddhist, but that's definitely what he seems like. I have a ferret trying to bite my foot right now, so I'm getting a bit distracted, but because I want it to be organic, I'm not going to cut this off or edit it. We met at his place, and I was amazed how open he was. I didn't expect to hear that much because of some of the stuff he has to deal with, which I'll let you listen to when you get to when you start listening to the rest of the podcast. It's so funny how my life has come about, because I'm running into all these people I know from so many different places that the ferret keeps on biting my foot. Sorry about that. That's why I keep on. Pausing. Thank you. So I keep on running into these people. It's time is like a wheel, I guess. Not to sound flaky, but it keeps on repeating itself, and people come into our lives in various different capacities. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have a prison guard is because they have to deal with a lot of shit, and their job is actually a lot more complicated than a lot of people think it is. And I always want to hear what it's like on their side of the street, because I can tell you an inmate's perspective, and I can sort of tell you what a prison guard's is. But as always, not as good as one of them. Someone who's coming from their own perspective. I thought it was a really good interview. Being around Roger is very calming. I like talking to him. He's an eccentric guy, just like myself, but he's got more equanimity than I do, which is a fancy word for just centeredness. And I think that's probably a huge asset in his work. And I can see why he is known as the inmate whisperer. What's going on in my life? Comedy, recording podcasts, getting together all kinds of different guests. I have so many lined up. You're going to be excited for a few of them. I've got a controversial one in the can. That'll be the following episode. This one is the one that I might start actually getting a bit of hate for, so I think I'm ready. But anyway, that'll be a different episode. What's going on in the world right now in comedy? Oh, first, we're about to announce the lineup for the Comedy Shocker 15th, January 13th at the Rickshaw Theatre. If you're interested in tickets, it's comedyshocker.com. I think by the time this gets released, the lineup will be announced November 14th. So, wait a minute. When is the Comedy Shocker? Hold on, I might have just misquoted it. Let's just make sure that I'm not wrong, so that I don't sound stupid. When is the next one? It is Comedy Shocker. Keep talking so there's not dead air. Comedy Shocker, Saturday, January 13th. Comedy Shocker 15. And we will be announcing the lineup in 2 days. Monday. Anyway, that doesn't matter. Louis C.K. has admitted that he was masturbating in front of people. Apparently George Takei has been accused of sexually assaulting someone. I don't know, man. A lot of this stuff's really complicated. I've been grabbed. I've been touched. I've even been masturbated in front of when I was in the court cells waiting to get sentenced one time, or I was just arrested. A guy I was in transport with said, "Hey, can I jerk off in front of you?" And I thought, yeah, sure, go ahead, man. It was an odd request. Usually guys just either jerk off and don't ask or just don't do it. But hey, I didn't want to, ruin the fun. I don't know. It's all complicated. I'm not going to speak too much to it. A lot of stuff is coming forward in the news lately, accusations and so forth. I bet you there's going to be a lot of false ones or exaggerated ones, and I don't know what to make of that. Again, sometimes when I go to gay bars, I get grabbed. Like, my cock gets grabbed. Do I like it? It's not my favorite thing. Do I hate it? Not really, because when I'm in a gay bar, I feel like I'm in their world, and that's just sort of what happens. And should they be doing it? I don't know. Apparently, from what I hear, that's kind of common practice. So, and I'm not saying this applies to women, but just saying for me, I don't necessarily feel harassed when I get grabbed, but I don't know, that's probably controversial what I just said. I'm probably going to get in trouble for it, whatever. Sometimes when a gay man grabs me, I feel it's a compliment. Sometimes I don't. The only time I really get concerned is if I tell him to stop and he doesn't, because then I'm concerned that I'm going to have to maybe get physical. And in this day and age, I'm concerned that if I get physical with someone who would not listen to me say no, I'm going to be accused of homophobia. So it's this kind of strange monster, social justice monster that's created. Like, can I be violated, or can I have a say and tell someone to fuck off without it being hate of some kind? Who knows? That's a question that is for the ages, and I don't know, and this is all stuff that's really complicated. Social media has made things so fast and furious that it boom, 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 you're bombarded with all this intense information. But regardless, we have a guest who's very interesting, and why don't we get to Roger Street? So you're waiting for a phone call.
I'm waiting for a phone call, Mark.
What kind of phone call?
Well, they're going to tell me if I've become promoted or not promoted at work. So I don't know yet what the phone call could be. So I interviewed for a warden's position, assistant warden's position last week, and so they phoned me numerous times. Right. But because I knew about this interview taking place, I've delayed the actual excitement of finding out or the disappointment of not getting the position. So there's a nice edginess around. Not about relationships, but about jobs for me.
Oh, interesting. Well, what a perfect segue. I like Roger already. He does a lot of the work for me. Welcome to Pulling the Trigger, and our guest today is Roger Street. And Roger Street was just talking about being a warden. So what's your current position?
Well, I'm a correctional supervisor, and I'm going for the assistant warden's position, which is the actual wardens would be one warden, but multiple assistant wardens.
Okay.
So as an assistant warden, I'm in a manager. I'm already acting in the position as the assistant warden on numerous occasions, but my true title is a correctional supervisor. So I'm actually looking for promotion at this point in my career and my advance, and that's what I'm doing.
What institution are you presently at?
I work at Surrey Pretrial, I've worked at North Fraser Pretrial, and I worked at Prince George Regional Correctional Centre with 24 years of experience.
Wow. And you're at North Fraser now?
I'm at Surrey Pretrial right now.
Oh, interesting. Fun fact about Roger and I don't think he remembers, but I do. I met you, air quotations,
yes,
in North Fraser in 2001 when I was one of your clients, and I think you were just a line staff at that time.
That's right,
I don't think
correctional officer.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was in this segregation unit at the time. And
I would have been working segregation.
Yeah, and we were smashing up the unit and setting off the sprinkler system and all that kind of stuff. I remember.
And fires.
And fires.
And fires.
Let's not forget that. And just to give it some history, North Fraser Pretrial Center was the first provincial institution in the province that opened up non-smoking. How was that when you started there? Well, sorry. What institution did you come from before you went to?
I had gone from Prince George, and that had been a smoking institution. Right. And then I'd gone to the new opening of North Fraser Pretrial, which was non-smoking and a larger facility. It was in Burcoquillam, and very difficult because of the not wanting to smoke and resistance to being there because people wanted to smoke cigarettes. Yeah.
Did you feel unsafe starting?
Oh yeah, it was full of. I did, but I was also working additionally as a program officer, so I had some buffer to be not on the security aspect, but I was definitely on all areas, and I saw a lot of stuff that was pretty intense.
Wow.
Aggression, violence, fighting. Lots of violence took place there.
In a prison, Don't say.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine.
Imagine that.
Well, how about we let's go back a bit. Let me think, because that's an interesting. We'll put that on pause. So you've been a correctional officer or working in correction for 24 years.
Yes.
Tell me how you got into it.
Well, I initially went to Langara. I took the criminal justice diploma. And I graduated in 1989. I had then I couldn't get a job at the time that I really wanted to get, so I actually went to Simon Fraser University and I got my degree. So I have a degree in criminology. It's wide breadth, I'm close to a master's. So I've got a huge amounts of credits and background from philosophy, sociology, business, even science stuff in my background. Anyways, and so once I got my degree, I applied for a position and I got a correctional officer position for BC Corrections right away. Like, it was the first job I applied and I was hired within 2 weeks. And so I didn't even look for other opportunities for jobs, and I just found the position, took it, and I started with Prince George Regional Correctional Center because that was an expansion that was taking place and they were looking to hire officers, and they said lots of growth and opportunity, so I went.
Wow. Why correctional officer, or was it just a random job you applied for?
I originally, it was interesting because I'd always wanted to go into policing, and I had never pursued policing following working in the prison, and I think working in the prison, it worked out well. Like, I think I turned out to be a good mix. I had 13 years before I had my very first sick day. So I actually came to work all the time, and the first time I ever had sick.
A keener.
Yeah, I was a keener. I was it seemed to work out well. I seemed to be a good fix. I also had a history of being in halfway houses from recovery. So I had a history of people. Grew up in East Vancouver, and I grew up with marginalized people, and I saw a lot of stuff that was kind of negative. So I understood the flip side about life, and I understood that people come from all background, and there would be substance abuse, mental health issues, violence, aggression, gangs. So I grew up from an environment that was pretty negative. So when actually I worked into the environment, one of my first observations being in prison was that my high school could beat up half these guys right away. Like, these guys were wimps.
Oh, really?
And it was really
the
strange.
Guys in the joint.
The guys in the joint of Prince George. Yeah, I just thought, wow, my high school, they would knock these guys out like left, right, and center. Like, I just and I recognized probably growing up in an East Vancouver school how aggressive I had come from, in a very aggressive background of people. That was interesting, a quick observation. So that was the first thing. People, like, they talk the same way. You'd never use the G word. That's
for our listeners, the G word is goof.
Yeah.
And you'll get a multitude of definitions of it, but long story short, it's the N word in prison.
Yeah, never in Canadian prisons say it, and in an American prison, don't punk me off.
Punk is the one in the States.
Yeah, they're like, whoa.
But if you go to the States and say goof, they go, what does that mean?
That means nothing, which is really interesting because it's a very, pro-Canadian prison term.
Yeah, but our heritage.
Our heritage, it should be part of the 150 celebration.
Yeah, something we can be proud of.
Something we can be proud of, for sure. So anyways, just words and phrases that you could say, attitudes, cliques, people down with different situations, not saying anything, don't talk to the man, being very, and so the observation about what was going on in prison, quickly I figured out it was parallel probably with my high school experience and growing up in East Vancouver, and it was a good fit. I immediately could work in words with people, talking in plain language that people understood. I wasn't aggressive, and I had some level of recovery. I go to a support group. I've always gone to a support group, so I had multiple years of going to recovery, and that was probably important for some of my success. But we'll go concentrating on the job itself. I was a good fit. It worked out well up to this point, and still to this day it is going pretty good.
24 years later.
Yeah.
So you've been in Prince George. You started off in Prince George, then went to North Fraser?
Yes.
Okay, so North Fraser opened in 2001, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I was there for about 7 years.
April 2001, I remember it distinctly because no one wanted to go. I was in Surrey pretrial at the time, and every day after the day it opened, they would cat 5 guys from each unit, or 20. I think it was 20 guys a day or something like that. And I remember the day they got me, I was like, "Fuck sakes, man!" And I got there and I tried to smuggle in some tobacco in a shampoo bottle. They caught it right to the digger. I went. Digger is whole segregation unit. All right, and funny enough, Roger and I met later in one of these support groups years later, because as some of you, my listeners may know, I've been clean and sober a number of years now, and so was Roger, and I bumped into him. I recognized him immediately as I never knew your name when I was inside. I just knew you were a guard. Yeah. You weren't one of the pricks. I remember that. Yeah. I never got beat because when I was in the segregation unit, there some of them beat me up and pepper sprayed me and stuff. Not playing the victim, I kind of had it coming to a certain degree, but it was pretty rough. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yep.
And I think that's a parallel where I realized that we work in an environment that's sort of risk-based, and you got like some things that can go sideways really quickly, and aggression can happen from both inmates and staff. And I think I see it,
The most scared I ever was of guards. I've been in lots of jails ever since I was a kid. Youth, provincial, federal. North Fraser was the one I was most scared of the guards. Yeah. At that time. I don't know what it's like. I haven't been there in a long time. But
I think it's changed. A lot of the staff are gone.
Oh, really?
A lot of the staff have been...
They were all old Ocala guys, a lot of them. And they're the hard-ass bulls that just, like, they... Yeah. It was tough, and it's like, it's hard because you might be... I don't know if you've probably witnessed this. It's when you have hardly anything when you're a prisoner, so when dignity is like, or at least face, pride, is about all you got, word, things like that. So when some asshole behind a desk is dressing you down in front of people and like trying to order you around, it's really hard not to say, hey, fuck you, man. Even though you know it's not going to do anything, it's like the last vestige of power you have, and then you tell them fuck you, and then you actually have to start worrying that your physical integrity is in danger now. Like, they might beat the shit out of you for that. Mm-hmm. And see, I'm not an old-time con. There are no golden years. Back in my day, I was always in modern prisons, right? But that was the first time I was ever actually scared of getting assaulted by staff.
By staff, yeah. Because I found... What I found was not necessarily staff. Staff was there, but what I found increasingly now has been the inmate on inmate is very aggressive. Like, and so where, yes, there was staff aggression, and now I'm like, yeah, I think it is there. It's probably always has been there, but what by far more is greater is like somebody could be punched out by somebody, their peer, like for sure, like, and randomly, and just for the reasons like somebody said something and that was the wrong person. Like somebody beat up a guy named Wilson, right? But there was 3 Wilsons in the area, right? But they pulverized a Wilson. Literally, I've heard stories like that. It was like, what? And the guy's like, they said, what's your name? Wilson. And they just hit him over and over and over. Wrong Wilson, right? It's like, whoa. So random stuff that kind of like doesn't get really thought out very well, and it's just by the nature of people that are in confined spaces and coming from substance abuse, mental health issues, low coping skills, already a history of violence, aggression, victimizer. You're just gonna. It's an interesting mix.
This wasn't your like a branch manager at the bank. Most of the guys.
No. You're average. No.
They were marginalized before they even got there.
Yeah,
pretty much. Right.
Yeah. And I think also another thing I recognize too. A lot of people are in for breaches. Like that's one of the biggest things. So they're not following direction. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people have been given a lot of chances, and they keep breaking those chances. So it's like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And so for myself, one of the things I often realize is like many people have been told many times not to do something. So I already recognize that they've already gone over the line numerous times from simple directions, like not to, report to a probation office, report to do this, and do not go to this area, do not do this, and do this, do not contact this person, and then they'll do it. So a lot of times it's just like non-compliance about following simple directions. And that's sometimes for myself, I already recognize that. I talk about that. I recognize that's what I'm dealing with, somebody that will not follow directions. So if I told him to make his bed and he didn't make his bed, I probably understand that he probably has been, the pattern is repeating itself. So it's trying to be...
If he's willing to face jail by going to a certain part of town, the making the bed thing is probably like...
Yeah. But on the flip side, if he doesn't make his bed, if I don't get him to make his bed, somebody will notice him not making his bed, and he could be victimized for not making his bed. And it wouldn't be a staff member, it could be another inmate who will take exception to him because he's got a federal mindset. He wants every inmate to have his bed made, and he's just like OCD about cleanliness. So I'm like kind of a balancing act between those worlds. But you're absolutely right. He probably won't make his bed anyways, and he'll just sit there and...
Well, I remember back then, making the bed was a big thing. It was one of it was one of the few things like every day you had to do. You had to stand 2 for count, and you had to make your bed.
Yeah.
Yeah, fun time. It's been so long. What, do you like your job? And if so, what do you like about your job?
Interesting. Like is a funny word. I would say I have to, I go to the work feeling strong in the morning and I'm exhausted by the end of the night. I think at times I've recognized when it's been really hard, like there's been murder and death and really heavy stuff, it's difficult. I have a brother who I talk to who's a doctor, and he's actually at Parallel University. He goes, when you talk to me about somebody dying or whatever, I deal with death all the time. So I've actually have a springboard with somebody who I recognize. So, and one of the observations is like, it's not that it's like, I like my job. It's just sometimes some things are very strange. And I was thinking about what is an example of strange was the day of that the Las Vegas shooting, I went to the gym that night because everything was on about, everybody was all fixated on about television, right? And I had one of the best days ever. It was a really good workout and everything like that. And everybody was fixated looking at the TV screen, looking scared and terrified. And I just recognized, well, I just was in a building with over 120 killers, and I really wasn't scared, terrified. It was just like another day. So I was kind of parallel universe when I went, wow, everybody in the outside world's really upset, and I'm not connecting to their upsetness because I'm having a pretty good day working out at the gym, and I've used my coping skills. I've detachment. Like, I'm just like, wow, I shut the day off, I go home and I go to the gym, work out and stuff like that. But I see other people are just in that zone, and it's like for 72 hours, everybody's, the news, the bombardment of violence, and everybody's like, oh, everybody goes into that numbness, and I'm like, I'm not into that. Like, I just don't do that numbness. It's just like kind of like I'm sort of on most of the time. Mm-hmm. So
I can relate to that because ever since I've been out of prison, I haven't been able to connect with a lot of people. Like, what I always say is, things that most people find normal, I find abnormal.
Yeah.
And things that most people find abnormal, I find quite normal. Like, the last guest I had was a lifer. Life sentences out. He's been out for a long time. He's a convicted murderer, though, right?
Yep.
I tell people about that. The average person, like people outside of our support group mainly, they're like, someone who's killed someone? I'm like, yeah, don't you? I know lots of people who've killed people. I know lots of people who've killed multiple people. Like, that's a normal thing to me. In fact, when I first got out of prison, I was amazed to meet people who'd never actually been arrested before.
Yeah.
I was like, really? Fuck off, come on. Once, right? You had a good lawyer or something though, right? And so I've had a hard time connecting with people. When something happens similar to what you're talking about, my reaction can actually upset other people. Even if I don't make an offensive, quote-unquote offensive joke about it, just the fact that I might not be taking it as seriously as they think I should can actually bother other people. Do you find you have things like that happen?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's like I deal with a commodity. As I am very dedicated to my work, so I'm always there. I do a lot of shifts, and I'm definitely in the front line. I am at the front line talking to people. Like, I'm not in an administrative position in working with paperwork. I'm actually front line talking to people and one-on-one. And, it is a point of, I just recognize, this person has done some really bad stuff, and I have to, it's like what I do for a living is dealing with people, and sometimes frequently the inability for them to communicate is very difficult and apparent to me why that they probably did something what they did, because they're difficult to explain their actions or explain something gets them frustrated. When they get frustrated, they can get aggravated and agitated, and then they get to the point where it's like, you're not listening to me, and it's not even I'm not listening, it's like they're actually talking about themselves that they can't explain or express. So the inability to dialogue properly. And so from one of my job is to assess, like when I start to see the nonverbal agitation, I say, okay, you look like you're upset. Let's just calm down and bring it out the conversation to little small amounts. Like, you're trying to tell me something, but it's frustrating, and you're getting frustrated, and then you can't communicate. And they're like, yeah. And I've recognized that from people with head injuries and people with, withdrawal, heavy withdrawal. They get the inability to actually say something, and those people can be really difficult because they have a propensity to hurt you quickly. So that's one of the things. And if I'm getting back to the actual question about, overall, I think I've got high levels of coping skills and also abilities to just listen, active listening skills, and assess things pretty quickly. They call it like I get known for the horse's whisper. Like, I kind of can talk to somebody that's
the inmate whisperer.
The inmate whisperer, yeah. Right? It's just like
whisperer,
he's going ballistic. He's done really bad things, and I'm like going, hey, what's going on? And I don't talk as much as I listen, and then I give active feedback. So I'm trying to clarify what that person's saying. So by showing that I'm listening, and a lot of times just listening to somebody when they're in their most distressed, upset moment brings the situation to a halt, and we just sort of common ground. What's going on? Like, what am I dealing with? And that's frequently the case. All the behaviors of screaming, yelling, and threatening are really a symptom of something else. That sometimes they're not able to express what's going on, and that's frequently the case. That's frequently the case, and they can't express it even if they wanted to tell me. They can't disclose information because there's a code of silence, so they can't tell me, and I understand that. And then there's another thing that they don't know why that they're frustrated, and I understand that. It could be that they're frustrated because they realize that their life is not going very well. It could be a domestic situation. They don't want to tell me that somebody's, like, I'll get my phone calls like somebody's gone missing by Tuesday. Somebody's going crazy, but a girlfriend's gone out using and doing something and gone missing for 3 or 4 days, and he can't get a hold of her, and now he's going crazy. And he, instead of getting crazy about the situation, he can't get a hold of his girlfriend, to get mad at the officers and the other inmates. And I'm like, what's going on? How come you're so mad? Right? But I recognizing the dynamic of certain situations when something's happening, try to pull out information, try to ask questions, who, what, where. I open questions to get information, closed-ended questions to rephrase it back, and also to show that I'm listening. And that's the horse's whisper. Inmate whisper.
The inmate whisper. Yeah. I guess you don't nip them on the ear or pinch them.
No.
You don't want to be the Harvey Weinstein of guards.
Not the tickler.
Yeah, not the tickler.
Not the tickler.
Not the tickler.
No.
Okay, what don't you like about your job?
What don't I like?
I bet you it's not what a lot of people would think it is. Because speaking to anyone who might be listening to this, I bet they have preconceived notions about what you don't like. And my assumption is, I bet it's different than what they think. So,
yeah, but I don't know. Like, well, it's. Yeah, I'm gonna go into different directions here. I have to be careful because the optics of sometimes the staff, but the people that I can work with, can be difficult because we come from different, diverse points of view, right? Mm-hmm. So I have a different way of looking at the world than somebody who's a real hard ass, a real, like, I want this done like this. Is gonna be, the enforcer, the regulator, and I'm like kind of like the social worker, the negotiator, the discusser, the communicator. So I'm kind of pro-social modeling behavior, and when I'm working with somebody that's really antisocial, actually, you know what? Sometimes parallels. I'll say one thing: truly antisocial people really disturb me. And that's come from examples like I could say, I work with people really in depth talking about conversations, and it's the parent about children and that they've hurt children, and they can't recognize how they're hurting children, but it's, to anybody listening to this conversation, you would be horrified. Like, some of the stuff that I've heard done to little kids is just like, okay, I wouldn't even repeat, because it would be like really, really off the Richter scale. The worst possible things have been done to kids have been done to kids. And I've heard this and I'm like going, you got to be joking. And I'm like going, no. And it's really, really, really gross. Right. So that kind of stuff is like kind of like that one. Those ones are pretty disturbing. Then sometimes but then I recognize I'm in a situation that's where obviously that's why they're in custody, right? That's part of it. In
a sense, they're in the right place.
They're in the right place. Yeah. They're in the castle, and they should be in the castle, and you don't want these guys out, right, for that reason. On the flip side, I'm trying to think of the other things, situations. Gratuitous violence, like every day I see a lot of blood on the floor, like a lot of blood and feces, and
by this you mean literally too.
Literally blood, and literally people have been beaten up and they've defecated themselves, and there's feces on the floor, and it's just like literally that, like that kind of stuff is overwhelming. And then when you go to a cell where somebody's done some self-harm, I've had this year, like I had somebody that talked to me at great depth and then had committed suicide. So he was talking to me at great depth about how great everything was good, you're a great guy, you're a fantastic guy, and then he killed himself like a couple of days later, and it was like kind of like, wow. Like, so sometimes that was another one that was kind of a blip on for a couple of days where you're kind of, because it was sort of really disturbing, but it was truly antisocial when it came down to it, because he was just saying stuff that was so overwhelmingly nice and polite, and he actually used himself as the weapon, so he turned on himself. And I recognize, rather than asking for help, and his overall set of circumstances wasn't extremely great. I've had other people like that's the same thing. It wasn't like he's the first one, but when people do stuff they turn on themselves, and it's just like kind of like, well, that didn't work out really well. Even myself, I have to be careful working with a mental health zone, because you just come home and you're like, oh, wow, that was terrible. You used detachment, and I don't want to. Do something. I can be so angry driving home that I have to be careful that I don't get into a road rage incident. So even myself, even on a very minor level, I don't want to be that. So that's sometimes the disturbing part. Like, because you're working in an environment that's full of negative, that when you deal with negativity or ungratefulness, and truly ungratefulness, like really, like I'm just, thought in that stuff like that. But I get name called all the time. I got really strange occurrences that the strange things are kind of interesting, because even the strange ones are very, there's
It's interesting listening to you talk, because for me, I've met lots of correctional officers over the years, right? So I've met lots of guys like you who talk in similar ways that you do. Like you described yourself as sort of the social worker, the mediator, the conflict resolver. I'm paraphrasing to a certain degree, but how many, if you had to break it down into percentages, how many correctional officers are like you that you work with?
Not many. I'm actually very unusual because I've got high levels of flexibility. I've worked in 4 different prison settings, opening prisons, and they're very stressful. I've worked in the management role, and I also work in the unionized front of the line role. I do disciplinary hearings, which means that I'm an adjudicator, like a judge, and then I'm also doing paperwork, and I'm also throwing handcuffs on somebody or OC spraying somebody. So I'm actually I've had huge depths of flexibility. There's probably a small number of people that do the amount of tasks that I do, but I also have my experience, knowledge, and training is a lot more than most of the staff, and I recognize that. So it's a bit strange that you're talking to somebody that's a little bit more knowledgeable about different the organization.
And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because I know you'd be a good guy to talk to about stuff like this. And when I was doing time, I broke correctional officers into 3 rough groups.
Yeah.
The majority are just guys or girls or whatever, just doing a job. They don't take it that seriously one way or the other. They're not there to administer justice, but they're not there to help anyone per se either. It's just a job with a paycheck.
Right.
The next largest group, which is still not a very big group, so I'd say roughly 60 to 70% are the ones that it's just a job. 15-20% are the ones that are there trying to help people. And the smallest minority, the smallest group, which is a lot of people were surprised when I'd say this, is the ones who are there to like, I'm gonna take it out on these guys. I'm gonna be I'm gonna administer justice. They're not being punished enough. Would you say that's an accurate assessment, or do you have your own take on it?
Yeah, that's a good take. I think somebody once said to me that another interesting point of view is that they said policing's a lifestyle, a correction officer's a job, and other things is that we in corrections, one of our biggest tasks is we just change chairs to change chairs. So it could be you're going on a break, you change your chair, going to do work station, you're going to go to a chair. You have to go to do some paperwork on a computer station, so you're going to change your chair. So the actual tasking of what we do is reversing, like, you know, and the bulk of it, I think, is people that are just doing the job. Another aspect I think that's missing from corrections that you might not see is a lot of people are using it as a stepping stone to get into policing, and a lot of people are they're being very well behaved and being very diligent. So what you may see is, like, you may not notice the ambience of career planning for a person. So they're using it, and it is really good career experience to get into, and then they can go on to policing, to border services, to work as an investigator for ICBC. So they're using the springboard as job experience. That part, I think, is one of the missing links that you may not, and it's really big. Like, and you may think, oh, that they're just doing, like, to the best of their ability, but they're probably just they're probably also still going to school, and they're still applying for jobs and building a resume. So your interaction is very minimal, but they're actually trying to get something else going on in their life, that process.
Ah, interesting. There's a sergeant in the Vancouver Police Department who was the equivalent of you can still call them SCOs.
Yeah. CS, correctional supervisor.
Correctional supervisor. Yeah. That's what they're called in the federal system now too. Because keeper is the nickname, but it's correctional supervisor. So he was a correctional supervisor, e.g. manager, and he's a police sergeant in Vancouver Police. And I remember he pulled me over during one of those drinking drive counterattacks. I was out sober a long time, and he recognized me and immediately starts looking to see if the car is stolen or not. Right? Mm-hmm. And I hand him all the paperwork and he goes, "Oh, this is a legit car." I go, "Yeah." He goes, "How long have you been out for?" And however long I've been out, a few years.
Well, that's also something to be mentioned too. You are an example, in my experience. There's very few people on so many levels. A lot of your friends are dead. Mm-hmm. A lot of people of your situation are in substance abuse issues or marginalized living situations. They're couch surfing. They're negative environment. They're just barely coping. They're probably the transient moving from location to location. You don't have and I recognized how far you have come as a person, which is sort of like where is Mark coming from? It's like kind of because you have a very there's very few people in your dynamic that you would, I think, I recognize that out of you, which is sort of a parallel with me in a certain way, because I don't really have a reference point to go in anyways. I've talked about my background a little bit. I've also mentioned that I'm gay, that I'm open about it,
right.
That I grew up in this city. I don't really have a significant relationship. So I've actually maintained sort of an open life situation. I believe that I'm trying to lead by some kind of strange example. I also have a strange background too, which is very strange because I was very, be involved with alcohol and recovery. So I was also through a whole bunch of very negative situations. So I too have an environment where my friends were also, I have a whole number of friends. By the time I got hired in corrections, I had about 80 of my friends that died from AIDS. So I have a huge legacy of the plague back from the 1980s.
Were these gay friends?
Yeah, I have all my gay friends that died, right? Yeah. So essentially I
knew a lot who died because I was a junkie. Yeah. I knew lots who died from the IV. Because back when it was bad in the 90s, it was gay dudes and junkies mainly who were dying in Vancouver of it, right? And I don't know, it was almost a competition of which one was dying more.
Right, and there was it was a really horrible time. So when I actually came working in corrections, I had this background that was just like, I felt like ghosts, like all these young dead guys that I knew that were my support network were all dead. So I was more in heavy levels of grief. Right. So then I go work in a prison system, which is a perfect environment for heavy levels of grief. But I was also a place where I think I fixated that I was going to stick, I was committed to try and make the world better because I recognized from pain and suffering and death and watching so many people on their deathbed saying, I wish I could live. And I went, well, I'll live for you. Like, I guess that was a kind of a thought process that went through my mind.
I understand that one.
So there's a burning desire to live. And maybe that's where you're coming from too.
It sort of is. We'll get to maybe some other time. And anyway, thank you for those kind words. You're an openly gay man who works in an all-male prison. Ooh, I bet you they're spicy. No, just fun. So you're openly gay? Do your coworkers know you're gay?
They do, and I don't discuss it openly. I'm sort of a Merv Griffin gay. I guess it would be like kind of like
you acknowledge it, but you don't necessarily go on and on about it, kind of.
Yeah, I acknowledge it, and I think the aspect of it has always been. When I was younger, I was attracted to older men for the most part. So my MO has always been an older fellow, and even to this point, I still have older companions. I've been with, I think, one younger man, but I thought he was older than me, so it's an interesting...
Cocksucker? Literally?
You caught me off guard. I thought he was an older guy. But anyways, so the profile for me is an interesting aspect, but then that's also, I guess, just open about that. But I think my inner circle knows who I'm attracted to, where my attraction level is. And then the aspect of it, too, I live alone, and I enjoy living alone, and I don't have any pets, and I maintain sort of my own simple situation, and I think one of my tenets about my life is to be honest, and so I'm honest and to be open and to be willing to take on the world and however it is. I also have been very much an advocacy. I've been through Pride and I've been in uniform in Pride, and then there was some situations with this year I didn't participate because we had the Black Lives Matter situation, and I realized that group is very upset with people in uniform, and so I made it. I said, well, you know what, I've gone in uniform about 3 times to Pride, and I thought, okay, I won't go this time. And that was a decision that was also like, your situation is very difficult, because I'd like to go to Pride in my uniform because I'm proud about what I do and where I am, but then I also recognize other people are upset with the dynamic and the perception of the uniform means something different to somebody else. So it's like kind of a balancing act, right? Being very politically correct, and I don't want to be caught into a dynamic like that. So pulling away, and so there's other parts in the community that I don't participate in doing that. Yeah, that was one thing that was a strange one this year.
A question just occurred to me. Because it's very timely considering so much stuff that's going on with Kevin Spacey and all this stuff, and like gay people in
Charlie Sheen just got caught too.
What did he do?
Corey Haim.
He fucked Corey Haim? Charlie Sheen fucked Corey Haim?
And when he was 13 years old.
Is that for real, or is that...
Well, Charlie just denied it last night. I just read that online. He said I had no relationship with Corey. Wow. It just gets stranger by the,
Whoa, okay. Put that one on the shelf just for a minute.
You can Twitter that one. Yeah. Google that.
So people get upset, like, oh, the gay men in the NFL, what are they going to be like in the locker room?
Yeah.
Kevin Spacey. So you're a gay man who works in an all-male prison, and you're still working there, and every time I've ever interacted with you, you're very appropriate, and I don't feel like, oh, he's trying to hit on me and fuck me all the time. How do I frame that? The question I have is, what do you have to say about a gay man working in these situations, whether it be the NFL or a prison guard or anything like that? Like, how What would you have to say to it, I guess, is the only question I have. Because obviously it can be done.
It can be done, and you know what? At the same time, there's a small number of people that I know that are in the situation that I'm in, and that's I'm not married to a woman, have a closeted lifestyle. I don't cover it up. I'm not, on a gag order not to talk about it. I'm open, so I'm in a very open situation, which is very liberating. On the flip side, I have dealt with people that probably had homosexual tendencies, that have committed suicide, that have done some strange things, that have gone through multiple divorces, marrying women, seeking out, losing the job, quitting the job out of embarrassment, being outed and being teased and bullied and felt I don't get teased or bullied. On the opposite, it's like kind of like,
you don't seem like the type of guy who would, because you're such a nice guy.
I'm also 5'11" and 240, so it kind of works with the dynamic of being that. But at the same time, I also recognize there has been a history of past of people being inappropriate within the gay community and within, bisexual men and situations that can go with the wrong way, right? And so it's just like, whoa, so I think from my observation, and even myself, I have probably been touched by people I didn't want to be touched, hurt by people I didn't want to be hurt by, fallen in with love with people that were just using me for a short period of time, underage situations and dynamics like that when I was younger, with older guys. And I thought, it was looking back at it when I've gone through my therapist and a process like that, he's discussed some of these things and he said, yeah, you know what, you've got some heavy duty stuff here. And I said, yeah, I know. And so that's why I go through some of my counseling and situations. And I also recognize that I think everybody's got some stuff going on in their life, and we're in the first sort of new generation that's sort of talking about it, and that I'm not going to let it define me, and that's why I keep doing. And one of the things I've actually found is interesting is I've had situations of being harassed and being bullied, and people have called me a faggot and shit like that at work, my coworkers. And I recognize if I'm going to take the time and energy to defend being called a faggot, because I can call myself a faggot, right? I'm not going to it's going to detract from my time and space to try to define me as a correctional supervisor and to do my own job. So I only got a precious amount of time. So while it can occasionally happen, if I can handle it, give them the stern look and just go fuck yourself, or my set of friends would call it a lot better than that there's a better way of that. My can't be friends would definitely break this down a little bit more better than you could possibly do it. And the strangest thing, a lot of times when I got called a faggot or the strange words, I'm really more concerned about latent homosexual men that are kind of attacking me, and I'm like, whoa, that creeps me out. Like that American Beauty, Kevin Spacey, but that kind of soldier that kind of kissed Kevin Spacey and he pulled away awkwardly, and it was like, whoa, I have experienced stuff really strange like that, and I'm like, hey man, this is really weird. Not into whoa, you're cutting me off guard. Yeah, that's been kind of a strange world, of that, which I found being
a guy coming on to you or something.
Yeah, I've had a police officer at one time. I had somebody grabbing me, and I was like, what the fuck, just don't touch me. What are you doing? It really, and catching me off guard, really inappropriately. So recognizing that, when I was younger, this would have happened, and now recognizing that I'm older, this stuff is now being more talked about, and we're at least having a voice, and probably there's more work to be done in it, but I definitely recognized. I also have, I would suggest go to professional therapy, talk to people about it, don't use substance abuse to as a defense mechanism to the pain of being, those types of things. And it's not my defining moment in if somebody did something to me, and I definitely it's kind of, I think, I don't put myself into harm's way, and I don't go out being the abuser. I'm very careful about stuff. Here's a good example. I will skin frisk somebody at work when something's really hot and heavy, and it's we just had a weapon, let's go like that. But I don't skin frisk people very much at work. I did when I was a younger officer and I had to do it. Now I'm just and interesting how some people want to be skin frisked. Some people take their clothes off right in front of me. I'm going, okay, put your clothes back on. And I'm I don't want to even deal with this kind of a behavior. So when I'm dealing with somebody who's being inappropriate and just being a jackass, I'm I just stop. Because I know that they're almost wanting to perform and trying to embarrass me by taking their clothes off and doing instant. So I also have a mode where I just stop this. No, I'm not into this. Excuse me for a moment, you can sit there, and I've done that several times.
Right. Which is a perfect segue into a question I was going to ask, because there's probably some people who might be listening to this would be thinking, so a gay man has to strip search males. Yeah. What's that like? And
it's not very. It's you just do it for the actual reasons. The thing about it is, in all my strip searching times, I remember a couple of incidences of actual strip searching, because now that they're long over with. There was one guy, he had been shot, and he hadn't told anybody he'd been shot. He defecated in his pants, and been shot, and I was discovering both blood and poo, and it was like, whoa, this is gross. Like, what's going on? How come nobody's helped this guy? That was a very strange one. I think of the compliance factor about being stripped. If a person's going to be stripped, they're going to either be, no way, I'm not doing it, or go fuck yourself, and then it's like a level of assessing a person's compliance level. Like, if I'm going to follow direction and do what you want, I could see it. And most people recognize he's trying to prevent weapons from being distributed, he's trying to prevent drug distribution and contraband, and he wants to see what's going on, and I get fresh clothes. And also, I'm going to see if a person's covered in bruises and a dynamic, because that's one of the things is when I definitely found people with slice marks and definitely strange things that they didn't even know had on them. And so that's been an occurrence. But for the most part, and this happens like once a year situations, I'm not going out there to skin frisk. And if anything, I don't even know the last time I skin frisked maybe.
Well, you're a supervisor. You don't do that shit, really.
No, but if the dynamic's really serious, like if we just had a situation involving weapons and we've got lots of bad
everyone
stuff.
strip searches.
Yeah, it's this is emergency. Let's go. Like, there's an emergency sense. But for the most part, I think maybe a few years ago, like I dialogue about what's going on, but sometimes they go into the holding tank and they'll start taking their clothes off, automatically thinking that I'm wanting them to be skin scourged, and I'm like, stop. And I've definitely done that. Stop. Hold it. Wait. I'm out the door. I'm not into it. Like, I'm just not into.
It's not a sexual thing.
No, it's not into it. But it's also like there's a small level of degradation around it, and I get that. And for me, I just maintain my situation. I have to do my task, but I'm not there. And it's also, like I said, I redeploy a staff, which is it's been delegated. And so for the last few years, that's actually since I've been promoted, I recognize that's something I do very rarely.
I remember the first time I was ever strip searched, I was 15. Put it in perspective. And you and I are used to this, but I was a 15-year-old kid who had to take his clothes off in front of someone who was at least 30 years old, or else they'd forcefully do it. Now, we understand at the correctional procedure, but if you actually break it down into those terms, that's a very strange thing to. If I didn't mention that it was in a prison, someone would say, "Oh my God, do you need to see a counselor about that?" No. They were just checking to see if I had knives or dope. And so I've been strip searched dozens and dozens and dozens of times. Most of the time I complied just because I didn't feel like fighting with them. I've had my clothes forcibly cut off me. North Fraser was the first time they did that. But I can honestly say, in all my years of doing time, I served about 10 years in prison total, if you add it all up. No correctional officer was ever inappropriate with me that way. I've been beat up, I've been verbally abused, I've been emotionally abused, but no staff member was ever sexually inappropriate to me in all my years.
And I think what we sometimes occasionally have is a cross-gender issue where a female may be involved, and it would be like secondhand, she happens to be walking past the situation. So that's been happening. So there's a gender issue when a man and a man's being stripped in some accidentally situation. So that has been tightened up over the years. But I think other than that, I don't think there's been any allegations of. I'm trying to think of anything that's been significant. I've never experienced something that's been over the top experience myself. That during that process, there's definitely people that refuse. And definitely people that don't want to, and then we'll go through the procedures of like you said, when you're being forced to be doing that whole process.
Yeah, they had, it was the emergency response team.
Yeah.
They did, how they do it, they pin me down and cut my clothes off.
Cut clothes off and put a smock on you.
Yeah, it was fun. I remember the pepper spray got in my eyes, then the nurse comes in and washes, they douse your eyes, right, with water. And then the capsaicin starts running down my body and hit my balls. Holy fuck, was that ever, oh man, because I didn't know about that one.
OC spray,
Oh yeah, and I'm handcuffed behind my back. I can't even scratch them.
That's right.
It was horrible. It was terrible.
Yes.
And kind of hot.
But not in a hot context. Well, hot, he means like physically.
I can only get an erection when I smell pepper now. What was I going to say? So we've talked. Okay, there's that stuff. So it's quite interesting having these discussions because it's the last guest was, like I say, he's a lifer. I was in jail with him as an inmate.
Yep.
Now I'm here. Actually, the last time I was in jail with him was the last time I was in jail when you were there.
Do I know who this person is?
His name's Glenn Flett. He might not have been in your, because he was a federal inmate. And I was in North Fraser. The last time I was in North Fraser was 2006 for 4 days, awaiting transfer to the federal prison. I'd robbed the bank after fucking up, and I've been back since. And so these are interesting trips down memory lane. It's interesting whenever I'm interviewing like guys like you or Glenn, I actually have to ask people, hey, what would you want to know? Because I'm like, oh yeah, I some of this stuff it's interesting, but it's not that interesting to me because it's my life. It's like, so I have to actually jot, okay, what would a normal person want to know? So, do you have any, one of the things I've asked some of my guests so far is like, do you have a story from work that you can discuss that's like bad or sad or tragic that sticks out to you?
Oh, bad, sad, or tragic. Let's see.
Probably lots, but is there one?
I'm trying to think of everything. But I've had Picton for that was well known.
He was there when I was there too.
He was there, and I worked with him for 8 years. That was heavy because of just the understanding what he had done. I'm very convinced he did it, and so I'm very, they got the right guy, and there seems to be a lot there. I thought that was gross because that was tragedy because it impacted a whole community, and so there's there's a lot of people impacted by one person, but that one.
Did you interact with them?
Yeah, there was a small group of us, and I fed him every day, on a 4-and-4 pattern, so I saw him every day. But strangely enough, I'll just, he didn't know my name. I have a name tag, and I've been working with him for 8 years, and I said, do you even know my name? He goes, no. It didn't really, he was very self-absorbed, very, and I thought, wow, that's very strange. The occurrence of that, you would have interaction for 8 years, serving him meals, talking to him, dialoguing, and just not really, he was in another way.
Did he have his own unit, or was it his own?
Yeah, they kept him. Oh yeah, he had to be kept away from everyone else.
Right. And then to shut the jail down when they moved him too, right?
Yeah, they would shut movements, and he was like, when you've got really high profile people, that there was safety risk about them, what would happen and what would happen.
And then the staff have to be extra monitored too, just in case they don't do something too, isn't it?
No.
I remember. Well, I don't
think so.
The reason I say that is because when Olsen was in his places in, I think he was Kingston and then the Shoe in Quebec, the wardens had to handpick the staff that dealt with him, just to make sure that they didn't, I'm going to spit in his food or I'm going to.
Well, you probably have some level of that because Oh, it's interesting because one of the victims, there's a woman of color, the only black woman that was on the list. She's there, you can see her. Dixon's list. Yeah. She went to my high school. So she was like, I went, wow. So I knew, and even dynamic of my mother worked as a Salvation Army thrift store saleswoman, and one of the first victims of Olsen was a co-worker of hers. The woman stopped coming to work, and it was one of the first, that goes back in 1980. So I recognize, within the people in the community have been impacted by some of these bad guys.
It's interesting, eh? The hippy-dippy Best Coast has had the 2 worst serial killers in Canadian history.
Yeah.
Olsen and Picton.
Yeah. They're from Port Coquitlam.
Yeah. Something about out there, right?
Port Coquitlam.
And your jail was out there, where you work. Yeah. Oh, no, not where you work presently, but where we know.
And mental hospital was out there.
Wow, something about it. Must be Indian burial ground or something like that, right?
I don't know. It's the Port. Well, Terry Fox is from there too, but
okay, so there's one.
But he passed away.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, he didn't finish the run.
Yeah,
that's terrible.
Yeah.
But that's good.
It's interesting. All right, how about a good story? Something that really sticks out to you about your job. Something that's
a good story.
Inspirational, or something that you're like, you left work going, wow, that was really cool that happened.
When I see actually the visitors that when they sometimes come in with their whole groups of their family visits, and that they're really happy that when the family visitors come, and you talk to the visitors and everybody seems to have had a good moment, it's kind of like that, or when you're talking to somebody when they know that they're going to get released. What's been a good moment has been on the outside, meeting people on the outside who are doing good, that have said good things like, hey, I'm doing okay. And you know what? And they look like they're doing okay, and they'll just give a brief, do you remember me? Da 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 da. So it's not necessarily the prison itself, but it's actually the success of somebody that's saying something. I saw you, and I'm doing okay, and they look like they're doing okay, and everything's going okay. Or even if they're coming back, but sometimes if they've come back on a breach, but they're looking healthy, and so a guy who comes back healthy who doesn't look because. Substance abuse, crystal meth, and cocaine, the people come back just horrible. And that's another one. When I watch somebody that comes back also very negative, it's like, I can't believe it's the same person. Somebody could come in 260 pounds and come back 170 pounds and covered in sores and emaciated and looking terrible, really, really terrible. But generally, if somebody comes back looking relatively healthy and they say, I am doing okay, I'm just here for a small thing, I'll be out the door. And I really kind of believe it, or else, that they talk about how they've settled down and that, they're getting some basic, I'm not like that anymore. And not like that anymore means that completely verbal outbreak, that mad at the world, mad at, that there seems to be some intervention going on. So that's important. Sometimes, there's smaller, I don't think of smaller victories that have been good for people. If also it's a good day when, like, I go on the units and I run the units and they're like going like, hey, this guy's a problem. You better take him off before there's a problem. And I'll take him off, and you know what? Oh my gosh, he's definitely going to be injured. And so if they group together and just say, take him off before we take him off, because
meaning the inmates.
So the inmates will agree, like, remove this guy from here. And I'll go talk to him, and it's very apparent, like he's putting paper all over his cell, and he's
like cognitive impairments.
Yeah, there's just definitely he's not in the right place, right? And so it's easy for them to hurt him and to get him off the area if nobody listens. But if they actually come to me and said, hey, come talk to you for 2nd Street, what's going on? The guy up in 211, you got to go talk to him. And then I'm like going, okay. And they won't even explain why. I'll quickly assess, like, hey, how are you doing today? And I'm like, okay, this is rather obvious. So they will and I like that part of the job was like, the ability, and they know that. I think that's understood when I'm on, like, and it won't be, I understand the guy who's going to talk to me won't be the heavy. They'll send somebody to go talk to me, and as a negotiation, as a discussion, hey, there's some tension here, or we got to talk, or being, when they're being well behaved in the process, they don't understand they're just doing time too, and they want stuff. Like I've gotten, some other things though too, like I would talk about making their bed and getting them to make their bed. Simplistic, but everybody's on board with that. And if somebody's not making their bed, that's a pretty good indicator. I've got a person that could suffering from mental health issues or can't get out of bed, or they've soiled themselves, right? So if I go in there and if I prevent and get that dealt with quickly, the others see that I'm doing my job right, and then it's a win-win situation. Street's going to go in there and get rid of the guy who's drug sick that soiled himself. We don't have to sit there and listen and smell this guy moaning and he's stinky. And they'll generally be well behaved for the process because they recognize, okay, he's brought it down 2 notches, we'll bring it down 2 notches. And it's almost like I could see the process working as everybody's on board. Like a
collaborative effort.
Yeah, collaborative effort. Because you know what, they could be mad that this has happened, but instead, when you actually go in, solve a problem, redeploy somebody, do something how it kind of win-win, okay, we'll settle down, you'll settle down. So that's... That can be there. That's something, and it's sort of a magic that takes place on a certain level because you realize, they're not going to do anything, and you recognize they could do something if you don't do anything, and so like the ability, I have to start to do something for something to take place, and that's kind of a special thing that takes place. I recognize that.
Wow, sounds like the inmate population generally has a lot of, I guess the politically correct fancy term these days is multi-barriered, but it because I think a lot of people get the vision in their mind that everyone in prisons is hardened criminal, potential rapist and all this kind of stuff. My experience is not that with most people. Most people I was ever in jail with were drug addicts with minor or major mental health issues, right? Would you say that's the standard inmate profile for you in your observation?
Well, I would even further. I describe it in different. Untreated drug addicts are people that have had some basic intervention drug addicts. Mm-hmm. Some people that have had basic intervention with drug addicts are good to work with because we can talk about stuff like, hey, have you been in a halfway house? Are you looking at going to abstinence? Are you looking at this? That's easy to work with. The people that have gone untreated, that are hysterical, egotistical, and just very demanding and going unchecked, really hard to work with and could be potentially hurting themselves or hurting other people. So they could be at risk or they could endanger other people because they just don't even understand that their needs are like, somebody could blow up because they had to wait 1 minute to get a meal, where everyone else in the real world would just be like, I'm waiting a minute to get a meal. Like, but to a person that with cognitive impairment, that waiting 1 minute is enough to just start smashing somebody on the head, take the food cart and start smashing them on the head, which is like, why would somebody do that? Well, that's why they're in jail. And so that part of it is like kind of like, and then so that's kind of the strange but wonderful part of working in the jail is like you kind of like work through those kind of people.
Some people often say that, particularly in Canada, our jails are de facto mental institutions, like where a lot of people who probably shouldn't be in jail, but there's no psychiatric institution to send them to, or they're a bit too antisocial for psychiatric institutions, so they end up in jail. Would you say that's an accurate description?
Yeah, and it's being more and more addressed. Like, there's definitely more. We have starting to have more. Like, I was in the beginning stages, even back in 2001, 2002, 2003. I had my first MDO range that was coupled with really. It was interesting because we had
mentally disordered offender range.
Yeah, I'm gonna call it mental health offenders now. So MHO, mental health offenders. But it is like people that have got mental health needs. Are in the system disproportionately, right? And their like antisocial situations are kind of like, they just don't like people, and they don't like situations that are hard to work with. And so if you've got people that are like that, coupled with other people that are they're difficult to they could do impulsively things. They could verbally impulsively say something that the average person would never say, and you would just be sitting there like they could start swearing and yelling, and you're like, why are you swearing and yelling? And they're like going, because you're racist. And I'm like going, but you're white and I'm white. What are you doing? Like, what's going on here?
They sound like liberal college students.
Yes, but it can be very strange. Like, it could just be like strange. Yeah, it's like, maybe there is
it's a mental illness. Mental illness. Very many different forms.
Yeah, it's just very strange. And so as long as you understand, like, that they're coming from a place where it's just like they could saw something on TV and it could be a commercial, and then they start yelling that commercial out full out, but you don't understand that they're actually just watched something on TV, and that's actually why they're yelling something full out, and you're like, what is that person doing? Like, so you just sort of take it in small, and it's sort of like there's different methods to stop the behavior, ask them what they're doing, and get them to check. There's the apologies, you focus on behavior, situation, and task, and not the person. So you try to, you don't say that you're a rotten, dirty, rotten scoundrel. You say your behavior is a dirty, rotten scoundrel. Your situation I find you in. So you actually can focus on that. And that way it's a little less of a sting when you're actually working with people, because people can certainly take on, like, I'm a badass, right? You're like, well, technically your behavior is not appropriate, but and it's interesting because sometimes people think that they're the really bad guys. My observation is sometimes people think that they're really bad aren't really all that bad, and the people that think that they're really not that bad are really bad. So that's a real strange occurrence. It's like
I learned that fast when I got out of prison.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, normal people are kind of fucked up, and they don't know how fucked up they are. Yeah, maybe they're not robbing banks, maybe they're not doing shit like that, but it's like, their character is often really fucked off. Like I was very shocked by that one.
But thinking that they're very, very good. Like, I'm very good, but I would be like, you're not that good. No. And so I find it strange because that happens on occurrences where sometimes people say that they're really bad, and really they're not all that bad. And so sometimes, but they're being sort of like, they got an echo in their mind that they're bad.
It's also an identity too. So because coming up the way I did, being bad was better than being nothing.
Yeah.
Because I was basically invisible and neglected and stuff like that. So the bad kid, the bad guy, the criminal, the convict, the drug addict was something to hold on to. Still have a hard time letting it go, to be honest. It's still a safety. It's in an odd way that many people can't understand, but you might be able to. There's a certain amount of solace in that identity.
Yes.
The bad guy, because at least it's safe. I know the parameters of it. I know the bounds of it. I know the rules of it.
Yes.
Yeah. Final one. So I asked 3 questions: bad situation or bad story, good story. You got a funny story?
Oh, funny stories.
I bet you got a few.
Well, I've been doing my stand-up.
Oh, yeah.
And so, to be honest, this recently, I've been talking to, I work my material with some of the cons and the inmates when I'm talking. And so, interestingly enough, we have comedy exchange. So I frequently I'll tell them my joke, which is the same joke, repeating it to 10 different groups of people in different locations, and then they'll come with me with jokes.
Right.
So they've definitely have told me lots of jokes and funny, and it's interesting to see them do that. Last week I had a really good occurrence. I decided, realizing how bored that they were, I photocopied 150 DJ names. And I went around to the building, and every time, because people would come talk to me because I'm the go-to guy, and I said, hey, we're doing a contest. I need to find out your DJ name. So everybody's, what do you mean DJ name? I said, well, everybody's got a DJ name because, disc jockeys are pretty popular. If it was back in the 60s and 70s, we'd have rock bands, but now it's DJ names. So I went around and I had them all, they were all excited and they were all coming back and they would actually go out and find DJ names. So they were coming back with, I'm DJ Khan, I'm DJ, and Khan spelled Khan.
That's funny, actually.
So they were all coming out with different names and phrases. And then, interestingly enough, I came to one guy and he got mad. He goes, "Are you joking with me?" And I'm like going, No, this is like I want you. He goes, "Well, I really am a DJ." And sure enough, he was listed with over 600,000 hits on YouTube. And I went, "Oh." Wow. And so he took it like, so... me being like very polite, and I'm like, well, that's interesting, but I didn't recognize that I'd actually tapped into some energy before. I had also gone around one day and I gave them all pieces of paper and I said it's castle drawing day, and I had everybody draw castles. So unbeknownst to themselves, so we had a very low key day, but I had 100 drawn castles. Oh, wow. But some of the castles were very poorly written. Right. And some of the castles were very, very well written, drawn. And so it was an interesting thing where I just would like. Sometimes when I recognize, if I give them because they'll do what you sort of say in a basic way. So if I give them a piece of paper and I said, okay, I need you to do something that's pretty simple, and keeping them busy, it sometimes works a lot better than to having them idle and being, So sometimes some of the things that I've done has been having the dialogue. Definitely the funniest parts have been just the small talk, talking smack with each other, which is, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Can you remember a particularly funny thing anyone said recently?
Oh, what did we see? They'll say stuff like, well, I'm growing mustache right now. So there's a comment about my mustache right now because it's Movember. Right. So definitely there's been definitely, you forgot to shave and I've got a handlebar mustache.
Well, also, this is a hack joke, but like, oh, you're growing a mustache from prostate cancer awareness because you're a prison guard. You can always do the inspections too, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Roger, how am I doing? Is it plump down there or what?
yeah. We got a hard rock in the.
I gotta pee a lot.
Is that a symptom?
It is. Yeah, if you have to pee a lot.
Oh my gosh, I better be careful.
Because it gets swollen and it pushes up against your bladder.
Yeah. Actually, my father passed away. Actually, my whole family has got prostate cancer, so that's probably one reason. I've actually been very active on that because that's been.
There's a question. We're almost done here. Just got a couple more questions. What do you do to take care of yourself?
Oh, I go to the gym a lot. I go to yoga. I don't eat.
A correctional officer who goes to yoga?
Yeah,
holy shit!
Very Vancouver.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, of course.
Vancouver. Very zenned out.
Support groups.
Support groups. Yeah, I've continually going to various support groups. I don't think what else to do. I definitely read. I don't watch television. It's not what I do. It's also what I don't do. I don't drink. I don't watch much commercial television. I don't have cable TV. I rest a lot. I go to the gym. Photography, social media, connecting to people, coffee, conversations, working with people that are coming into recovery from abstaining from drugs and alcohol, organizing volunteer stuff, volunteering myself, fundraising. I do the comedy as well. We've done doing stand-up comedy.
So we've worked together, as it were.
Yes.
We've been in recovery together.
Yes.
And now we do stand-up together.
Yes, I get on put the mic on the face and say some stuff about life.
We must have some kind of soul bond or something like that.
We could. We could be brothers from another mother. We could be a distant relation.
Something like that.
In a past life. Somebody's connecting to us. I had this thing about dimes. Have I told you my dimes thing?
No.
Every time somebody dies, they leave you a dime. If you find a dime, you can Google this too. It's an interesting thing. And sure enough, when I would find dimes following, because I've had some recent death with some people in my life. I know your work has been advocacy for the naloxone program, and fantastic. Very sad because one of my sponsees died 2 weeks ago from a drug overdose, and so very close to at home, and I've watched a lot of people that have passed away. And following this, I always say, you find a dime somewhere, and it's been an interesting thing because I found certainly a lot of dimes. So and your work on there has been phenomenal. I know I'm at the front line too with promoting people to take the Suboxone and also to awareness. I really wish they would go for abstinence rather than just harm reduction, but I'm doing what I can to
Yeah, that's one of those controversial ones right now, because I'm abstinence-based recovery, you're abstinence-based recovery, and
yeah, and that could be also difficult when you're going back to original situations, because I actually have had that during my job interview when I was talking about that. I really found it difficult because I believe in abstinence and we have a harm-based reduction philosophy.
Well, harm reduction's the de rigueur, right? It's the popular one these days, and I'm not. See, unlike some of our brethren in our support groups, I'm not militant abstinence.
Yeah,
but I'm not. Harm reduction, I see its flaws too, right? I don't think either of them are perfect, and I don't think either of them are for everybody. But I can see some people who are using harm reduction and it's being pushed on them. That's like, this guy needs to get completely abstinent. This harm reduction is going to kill him, actually. Then I see other people who have problems in our support group, and it's like, I don't know if our support group's necessarily the thing for them, right? Like, there's probably something else they could do, right? Like, but anyway.
Yeah.
You and I have talked about how you're noticing the opioid issue in your jail.
Yeah.
You're seeing overdoses inside.
Well, here's the thing. You're right and you're wrong.
Yeah.
We're getting not as many. Disproportionately, it's in the community where it's coming, particularly the downtown east side. We already know that. That's where it's going in, to ground zero. We're not getting it in custody, but here's a public policy I believe is in place because they don't have access to alcohol. You can't have alcohol and Suboxone at the same time. It's a very dangerous combination.
Right.
In theory, there's no alcohol in prison because the brews don't exist. But we give a lot of the offenders Suboxone, which would reduce the opiate. We reduce fentanyl by 60%. So your chances of overdosing with fentanyl would be very minimal in custody because most people are on Suboxone, which closes the receptor site. As soon as they leave custody, I don't know if those people are getting Suboxone, because I'm wondering how many people are not getting access to Suboxone, which could stop this, or because they've been getting it freely and openly. Is there a way a person's getting? I don't know. I'm curious if there is a correlation between people being let out from custody and death within 3 to 4 days or within 2 weeks of being released, because they could use in custody and nothing much is going to happen. They're going to be okay. But as soon as the Suboxone's taken away from their system, the opiates receptor cells are now wider open, and
you don't have the tolerance anymore.
They don't have the tolerance, and so I'm curious if, like you said earlier, but the harm reduction approach may in fact be causing problems here that's going on. I don't know.
I've heard similar things. I can't speak to it too much because I can't remember it enough to speak to it, but I've heard similar theories that it might actually be contributing to this. Some data has indicated that
something's going on, but at the same time, it's good to talk about it rather than just pretend.
Well,
but we've had overdoses for sure, and we've had people that have actually deliberately not taken the product and using it as a vessel to kill themselves, because it's like falling asleep. So it's the actual opioid overdose is like falling asleep. So it's not very painful as hurting.
They wake up dead.
So they don't even know what's going on. The staff are like running around.
Most of the people I know who died, it was one of those things. They were found dead. And they probably nodded off and just didn't wake up.
Right. And they usually go through a process of gargling and
but they're alone.
They're alone and they're in a bathroom or,
it's 80-something% men.
Yeah. I just heard that this morning it was 1,100 today.
1,100
today.
The coroner just released their latest report.
It's to me, it's just shocking because we're going to hit the December time, which is going to be a traditional time. A lot of people are much more enclosed spaces.
I think the projected number was 1,500. Something like that.
Yeah, and that's not to say what we actually know process, because I think that's probably still, like, there's probably other people. And if you got that many, how many of them can they really find in the process of finding? I mean, the coroners are probably overworked, much like the jail system's overworked, just like the healthcare system's overworked. So the actual true number can be distorted amongst other informations, like if somebody had an enlarged heart. Well,
and then there's also the people who are dying from indirect drug use, like, because fentanyl's taxing their body and stuff like that too, right? And
or having a head injury following being knocked out, and then subsequently more problems happen, and then having an accident because of inability.
Another one is people nodding off on one of their extremities, an arm or a leg, and then having nerve damage because the circulation was cut off for like 8 hours. They're completely unconscious. They don't die, but they wake up and their legs fucked up forever.
Yeah.
I've heard a few of these now, right?
Yeah.
Because apparently I've never done fentanyl. I'll be honest. If I was out there still using, I'd try it. Fuck, it sounds awesome for as far as a junkie goes. But apparently it's unlike anything. A buddy of mine was telling me, he's like, who's pretty good at articulating things. He says, different ball game out there. It's not the same. It's like an apocalyptic kind of environment now. Like there's something.
And it's not just Vancouver. No, as I understand, the United States, thousands of people.
It started in Vancouver and it's spreading east. Like every city has it now, it seems.
Well, I grew up in Vancouver and remember about it was 76, 77 when the beginning of the heroin started to be intervent into the downtown east side. Yeah. And then I remember that exactly the same situations, and then it would go to hit New York, and then it would hit.
Because we're the port city, right?
We're the port city close to the environment, yeah.
Apparently, I can't corroborate this. This is what I've heard, and I'm not saying anything about anyone. Apparently, our port's really easy to get stuff in because of people who run that particular port. So I've heard. It's a rumor.
No, that's not true. That's not true.
Could be just false, fake news. Well, we're getting close to the end here. I appreciate your time. One final question I ask all my guests.
Sure.
What would you want the average person to know about what you do? Because there's going to be what closing thoughts, something that you'd want to convey to
I'm trying to change behaviors because coming from bad situations myself, I'd like to try that people can get better, people can change, and almost all of the offenders that I deal with are going to get out. There are those that are never getting out, and so I get that, and they probably should never get out because there's a small group. That's a very small group, but most of the people that I'm working with are going to get out, and I'm hoping that they will get out without doing further harm, without further being negative. And so one of the things I guess I'm just trying to do is, in the face of antisocial world, try to be pro-social. In a face of people who have substance abuse issues, I'd like to say, no, you don't have to put drugs and alcohol in your body, and live by example. Lead by example by not doing those things, taking it one day at a time for the most part. I actually really focus in on that because there's just small tasks that I could do throughout the day. The 3-foot rule, like can I handle anything in a 3-foot basis in my immediate circle at work, or do this task, do that document, process that. I mean, I can type fast, I can read fast, I can assess stuff. I have to stay healthy, so I guess all people should just try and stay healthy. I don't eat animals. I don't know if that's cool, but I think that it's not. Try to reducing animal fats, milk, eggs, and stuff is actually probably reducing. That's probably why I stay healthy, because I don't do. I make certain choices, lifestyle choices, that basically keep me healthy so that I can do my task, and I've just followed directions from other people that kept them healthy, and so that's something there. I mean, I have eaten animals for sure, but this has been more recent. Like I've been a little bit more stricter with my diet with recent times, so that's something that's going on.
Well, cool. Good place to stop. This is Roger Street. Thank you very much for being a guest on my show, Pulling the Trigger.
Thank you, Marcus. And thank you very much for interviewing me. I really look forward to this today.
Yeah, it'll probably be released next week. I try and do it every Thursday.
Okay, so, that's good.
Yeah, I just released the last week's one. If you want to listen, it's on my Facebook. So,
okay, that's good.
So, have a good one.
Thank you. Thank you very much.